Hello, greetings, peace, and power and elevation be to everybody out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. So I'm continuing off where I left off on epistemology. So I'm going to give a recap on epistemology. Then I'm going to get into the concept of self-knowledge, or what we know as knowledge of self. But one, but before I go there, I want to say thank you to everybody that's been subscribing to my channel, liking my channel, sharing my channel, watching the video, etc. I appreciate that so much. I hope this channel continue to grow so I can get more people on here, because my goal is to have people on here and to get people involved and etc. All right. So, anyways, let me go ahead and get started. Now, let's give a recap of what epistemology is. And if you guys don't have this book, you need to have this book in your archive. It's called History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling. History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling. Now, what is epistemology? According to this book, epistemology is the theory of knowledge, is a query into the nature of knowledge and how it is acquired. It investigates the distinction between knowledge, belief, and opinion, seeks to ascertain the condition under which a claim to know something is justified, and examines and offers responses to skeptical challenges to knowledge. All right. So that deals with the theory of knowledge. So to break it down, as I mentioned, epistemology is dealing with the introduction of knowledge. That's all it is. In its simplicity. You deal with the introduction of knowledge, right? No. Take that back. Philosophy is dealing with the introduction of knowledge. Epistemology deals with the study of knowledge. All right. Just look at it like that. It deals with the study of knowledge. And science deals with the application. I'm going to say that again. Philosophy deals with the introduction of knowledge. Epistemology deals with the study of knowledge. And science deals with the application of knowledge. I mean, that's the best way to break it down. Use it in that three simplistic form. Okay. So now let's get into the question. Well, what is knowledge of self? What does it mean to have a knowledge of self? How do you acquire a knowledge of self? Who's entitled to give someone knowledge of self? And how do you develop knowledge of self? Now, many people have asked these questions. Even those in the conscious community, they have asked the question, what is knowledge of self? Because, see, the term has been used loosely. It has been used loosely for a very long time. People walk around saying, well, I got the knowledge of self. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean to have the knowledge of self exactly? Do you exactly have the knowledge of self? If so, what step did you go through in order to have or gain the knowledge of self? So now, I want to deal with the concept of knowledge of self from the academic standpoint, because when I say academic, we talking about psychology here, because this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the psychology. All right? And you're dealing with what we call cognitive psychology. So cognitive psychology, let's go ahead and let's look that term up real fast so we could be on the same page. All right. So when you talk about cognitive psychology, what is that? It's the scientific study of mental process, such as attention, language use, memory, perception, problem solving, creativity, and reasoning. Right? Cognitive psychology originated in 1960s in a break from behaviorism, which had held from the 1920s to the 1950s, that unobservable mental processes were outside of the realm of empirical science. This break came as researcher in linguistics and cybernetics, as well as applied psychology, used models of mental processing to explain human behavior. Much of the word derived from cognitive psychology has been integrated into other branches of psychology and various other modern disciplines such as cognitive science, linguistics, economics. The domain of cognitive psychology overlaps with that of cognitive science, which takes a more interdisciplinary approach, includes study of non-human subject and artificial intelligence. Now let's go into cognitive science real fast. All right. So you may wonder, well, what does all of this have to do with knowledge of self? Well, let me show you, because this is where you got to be able to connect the dots. Check this out. Cognitive science is the interdisciplinary scientific study of the mind and is processed with input from linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, computer science, artificial intelligence, and anthropology. Right? It examines the nature, the task, and the function of cognition. Cognitive psychology scientists study intelligence and behavior with a focus on how nervous system represent, process, and transform information. Okay? Now, mental faculties of concerns to cognitive scientists include language, perception, memory, attention, reasoning, and emotion. To understand these faculties, cognitive scientists borrow from the field such as linguistics, psychology, artificial intelligence, philosophy, neuroscience, and anthropology. Okay? So now, the typical analysis of cognitive science spans many levels of organization, from learning and decision to logic and planning, from neural circuitry to modular brain organization. One of the fundamental concepts of cognitive science is that thinking can best be understood in terms of representational structures in the mind and computational procedure that operates on those structures. All right. So again, when you're dealing with the knowledge of self, that deals with the mind, the mental state. You got to go into the mental state of how knowledge of self come into play, because that means that you have to analyze oneself. You're using analysis. You're sitting back and you're processing yourself. So it's kind of like you take your face and your face become that mirror. You're looking at yourself. So it's like when you wake up in the morning and you go look yourself in the mirror. When you look yourself in the mirror, you have all different type of thoughts that comes around, right? You have thoughts about yourself. You analyze. You're not just looking at your face. You're looking at your soul, right? Okay? You're looking at you from the abstract point of view. You're not just looking at the physicality. Hey, brother Sarkufu, how you doing? You're not looking at yourself from the physicality, not just a physical part of you. You seeing yourself from within. So when you, and don't tell me that you don't get up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror. Obviously, if you don't look yourself in the mirror, then maybe you're not paying attention to maybe you're not that type of person to pay attention to yourself. I don't know. But when you get up in the morning, if you have a mirror in your bathroom, you're gonna look yourself in the mirror. You can't help that. You know, when you're brushing your teeth or whatever, you're looking at yourself, right? But when you're looking at yourself, you're not just looking at your physical self, you're also looking at that internal self too. You're internalizing things. So knowledge of self brings about the reflection of self. But let's go ahead and let's get to the academics of it. All right, so again, let's deal with knowledge of self from psychology. Okay. Now, according to the terminology, what we call knowledge of self or self-knowledge is a term used in psychology to describe the information that an individual draws upon when finding an answer to the question, what am I like? While seeking to develop the answer to this question, self-knowledge requires ongoing self-awareness and self-consciousness, which is not to be confused with consciousness. Young infants and chimpanzees display some of the traits of self-awareness and agency and contingency. Yet, they are not considered as also having self-consciousness. At some greater level of cognition, however, a self-conscious component emerges in addition to an increased self-awareness component, and then it becomes possible to ask, well, what am I like? And to answer with self-knowledge, though, self-knowledge has limits, and introspection has been said to be limited and complex. Self-knowledge is a component of the self, or more accurately, the self-concept. It is the knowledge of oneself and one's property and a desire to seek such knowledge that guides the development of self-concept, even if that concept is flawed. Self-knowledge informs us of our mental representation of ourselves, which contains attributes that we uniquely pair with ourselves and theories on whether these attributes are stable or dynamic. To the best that we can evaluate ourselves, the self-concept is thought to have three primary aspects: the cognitive self. Go back to that cognitive, the affective self, and the executive self, right? The affective and executive selves are also known as felt and active selves, respectively, as they refer to the emotional and behavioral components of the self-concept. Self-knowledge is linked to the cognitive self in that its motives guide our search to gain greater clarity and assurance that our own self-concept is an accurate representation of our true self. For this reason, the cognitive self is also referred to as the known self. The cognitive self is made up of everything we know or think we know about ourselves. Now, going back to what I was talking about, cognitive science, cognitive psychology. Why? Because you got the answer in this paragraph, cognitive self. And cognitive self reflects to what? Knowledge of self. So why does cognitive psychology have something to do with knowledge of self? Because you're dealing with the cognitive self. Cognitive self is involved in this. Anytime you got cognitive self involved in this, that's where you got to incorporate cognitive psychology and cognitive science. Now you see, I connected the dots. Now, once you connect the dots, then you get that understanding. But let's continue. This implies physiological properties such as hair color, race, and height, and psychological properties like beliefs, values, and dislikes, to name but a few. Now, what it says, relationship with memory. Now, self-knowledge and its structure affect how events we experience are encoded, how they are selectively retrieved/recalled, and what conclusion we draw from how we interpret the memory. The analytical interpretation of our own memory can also be called meta memory and is an important factor of metacognition. The connection between our memory and our self-knowledge has been recognized for many years by leading minds in both philosophy and psychology. Yet the precise specification of the relation remains a point of controversy. All right, so it goes into the different memories, but I'm going to hold off on this, okay? I'm going to hold off on this and come back. So now let's go into the articles. All right, so This article comes from the Philosophy and Phenomenological Research on January 2009 from the International Phenomenological Society. All right. So this article is called Two Kinds of Self-Knowledge by Matthew Boyle, Harvard University. So let's look at the introduction. It says Kant famously held that we possess two fundamentally different kinds of self-knowledge: knowledge of ourselves through inner sense and knowledge of ourselves through pure apperception. Apperception. The formal faculty, he claimed, gives us knowledge of our own sensation, knowledge of ourselves as passive beings, while the latter gives us knowledge of what we think and judge, knowledge of our own spontaneity. Nevertheless, although he held that these two faculties are distinct, he also thought there was a relation of dependency between them. He argued that knowledge of ourselves through inner sense would be impossible in the absence of a capacity for pure apperception. For he claimed the latter capacity, the one manifested in our ability to think of ourselves as I, is the capacity that makes us knowing beings at all. These Kantian claims are, of course, obscure, and interpretive literature that has grown up around them is vast. Without worrying about how to interpret Kant's actual views, however, we can think of the claims just mentioned as constituting the schema for a possible view about self-knowledge. Such a view would distinguish two kinds of self-knowledge or knowledge of our own minds, an active and a passive. But although it would hold that these kinds of self-knowledge are distinguishable, it would also maintain that there is a relation of dependency between them, that one of the two kinds could not exist without the other. All right. So now, what is the two kind of knowledge of self that this author is talking about? All right, so let's go down to the first example he gave was Immanuel Kant. Okay, now Moran on self-knowledge and agency. Let's see who is Moran. All right, so that's Richard Moran, by the way. Moran on self-knowledge and agency. There are familiar reasons to be puzzled by our capacity of self-knowledge. Okay, it is widely recognized that we can know our own present thoughts, attitudes, and sensation in a way that is fundamentally different from the way we know of the mental states of others. The precise character of this difference is a matter of dispute, but it's generally agreed that a person is normally in a position knowledgeably to ascribe various kinds of mental state to himself without needing the sort of evidence that would be required for his ascription of such states to another person, and that too self-ascription of these kinds of mental states are not normally liable to the same kinds of error that afflict ascription of such states to the other people. The former feature of the relevance or relevant ascription is commonly referred to as their immediacy, while the latter is one manifestation of their authority. Their apparent entitlement to some sort of deference not accorded to the third person evidence based ascription of the same kinds of states. The general problem of self-knowledge is to explain how can we be in a position to speak about our own minds in such an immediate and authoritative manner while still counting as speaking about the very same states that can be known to others only on the basis of observation or inference. And then go down and say, if we grant that Morin has described a possible form of self-knowledge, it is natural to ask how much of our actual self-knowledge takes this form. Morin himself invites this question by suggesting at various points in his book that his observations share light not only on our knowledge of our own beliefs, but on our capacity for privileged self-knowledge in general. All right. So at one point, for instance, he characterized himself as having argued the case for seeking the ability to avow one's belief as the fundamental form of self-knowledge, one that gives proper place to the immediacy of the first person awareness and the authority with which its claims are delivered. All right, so I'm gonna be honest, I don't really like this article here. I don't think this article is, to me, it's not thorough enough. So that's why I stopped. But if you guys want to check out this article, you can. It's called Two Kinds of Self-Knowledge, right? So now let me go on to the next one that I have available. This one is dealing with the 5 kinds of self-knowledge. And this one came out in 1988, which is called Philosophical Psychology, Volume 1. All right, so the 5 kinds of self-knowledge by Ulrich Nessler, Department of Psychology, Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. So it goes down to the introduction. And what the introduction say? Considered as a unitary object, the self is full of apparent contradictions. It is simultaneously physical and mental, public and private, directly perceived and incorrectly imagined, universal and culture specific. Although there is nothing with which we are more familiar, we are often adjoined to know ourselves better than we do. One way to clarify this puzzle may be to consider what makes it possible for individuals to know themselves at all, to analyze the information on which self-knowledge is ultimately based. The analysis to be presented here distinguish among several kinds of self-specifying information, each establishing a different aspect of the self. These aspects are the distinct that they are essentially different selves. They differ in their origins and developmental histories in what we know about them, in the pathologies to which they are subject, and in the manners in which they contribute to human social experience. Here in capsule form is the list. Now, before I go to the list, now, is there various forms of knowledge of self? Is there different levels of knowledge of self? Or could it be Unitarian? Could knowledge of self just be under one umbrella? Or could there be multiple phases of self? Now, see, this is the tricky part. This is the tricky part right here. Well, when we talk about knowledge of self, is it different phases of knowledge of self, or is it under one umbrella? Or is it under one umbrella, or is there different phases that we go through? Is there multiple steps to have knowledge of self? What is it? What exactly does that mean to have the knowledge of self? What does that mean exactly? In layman terms, what does that mean? We know that, okay, you bring about sense of awareness, but are there various stages that you can have with knowledge of self? Are there various stages that you can have when dealing with the knowledge of self? Let's go ahead and continue. All right, so let's go into the 5 stages or 5 kinds of self-knowledge. The ecological self is the self as perceived with respect to the physical environment. I am the person here in this place, engaged in this particular activity. In other words, there's a saying goes like, you are the product of your environment. So if you are the product of your environment, that means what? You become a reflection of your environment. So it's based on your upbringing, how you were conditioned. How was you raised in a particular environment? What type of background did you come from? What type of people were you encountering? Because that has a reflection on one's attitude. Even if you stepped away and you decide to move on and do better things in your life and develop different ideas, etc., that part of you still stay in your subconscious. It still become a part of your behavior. So that part of you don't die completely because you're so used to it. You're so used to growing up in the way that you grew up, right? You're so used to your environment. So yeah, you may go out and travel and learn different things and have different names or whatever, but you still connect to that environment that you come from. And see, all the time people try to forget where they come from and how they was raised. You can't forget that. You can't forget that unless you have some type of amnesia. If you got amnesia or some type of memory loss, then that's a different story. But 9 times out of 10, you won't forget where you come from. You're going to try to put it behind you, or you're going to try to put it in the past, but you're not going to forget. You're not going to forget about where you come from and who you were and what you did. Because that part of you is still going to be stuck in your memory. Unless you have short-term memory, unless you got amnesia, unless you're coming down with dementia and you don't remember shit, you don't even remember where you at, then that's a different story. But let's go ahead and continue on. The interpersonal self, which appears from earliest infancy, just as the ecological self does, is specified by species-specific signals of emotional rapport and communication. I am the person who is engaged here in this particular human interchange. All right, so that's an interpersonal self, which appears from earliest infancy, just as the ecological self does. It's specified by species-specific signals of emotional rapport and communication. I am the person who is engaged here in this particular human interchange. So I am this person. I was born as this person. I came into existence as this person, basically. The extended self is primarily based on our personal memories and anticipation. I am the person who had certain specific experiences, who regularly engage in certain specific and familiar routines. So this part of the extended self deals with the subjectivity because it based on what's your personal experience like. What did you gain what type of skill sets that you have that developed you into the person that you are, right? And then it goes on to say the private self appears when children first knows that some of their experiences are not directly shared with other people. I am, in principle, the only person who can feel this unique and particular pain. Again, that goes back to the subjectivity, because you're dealing with the individual part of you that's dealing with some type of pain and some type of issue, and that you internalizing these things. Only you dealing with that. Somebody else is not going through what you're going through. Now, they may have similar stories or share similar experiences, but overall, you dealing with that personally on your own. Now, the conceptual self or self-concept draws its meaning from the network of assumption and theories in which it is embedded, just as all other concepts do. Some of those theories concern social roles: husband, professor, American. Some postulate more or less hypothetical internal entities: the soul, the unconscious mind, mental energy, the brain, the liver, and some establish socially significant dimension of differences: intelligence, attractiveness. There is a remarkable variety in what people believe about themselves, and not all of it is true. So, conceptual self or self-concept is what you perceive about yourself. What do you think of yourself? How you see yourself? You don't see yourself in a way that the self is presenting the self, right? You see yourself from the spiritual light. You might see yourself from the soul, or you might give yourself a title that you believe that you deserve, but that title does not always mean that it represents you. However, in your mind, you may think it represents you, but to another group of people, when they look at you and they see your title, they may not see that, oh, that you reflect the title that you giving yourself. So when people walk around and say, I'm a king, when you hear men say, I'm a king, right? That title, they may feel that self-concept or the conceptual self, because they see themselves as kings. But not every man is a king. And not every man knows what it means to be a king. But some men call themselves king, but do you really know what that means? Are you really a king? Or are you just saying, are you using that title because it makes you feel some kind of way? It gives you some form of empowerment. It makes you feel good about yourself. So what you're dealing with is the ego self. So self-conceptualization, right? Or conceptual self deals with more so the ego self. Because you give yourself a title just so you can aggrandize who you are. You can aggrandize your ego, and that's going to be another topic that I'll do another day. Aggrandizement of the ego. Yes, I'm going to do a topic on that. But anyways, people aggrandize themselves by giving themselves certain titles. Like a woman might walk around and say, I'm a queen. All right. Is every woman a queen? Do you know what it means to be a queen? And there's two types of queen. Which queen are you? Are you the queen with the A, or are you the queen with the E? Because the queen with the A is an old word or old terminology that's not often used anymore to represent what we call a lewd woman, a whore, or what we say in this generation, thoughts. That's what the queen with the A represents. But the queen with the E represents something totally opposite of that. All right. So do every woman have what it takes to be a queen? Do every woman have that entitlement as a queen? Do every woman deserve that title? Or another one I want to do. This whole thing about the gods and goddesses. Well, what does that mean when you say you're a god and goddesses? Exactly. Is everybody a god? In the sense of understanding who they are as a reflection of themselves? Or are you a god because it's a aggrandizement to your ego? And majority of people, when they walk around saying I'm a god and goddesses, they trying to appeal to their ego. It's not some type of reflection to yourself. It's more so appealing to your ego. I'm God. I'm goddess. Well, exactly what does that mean? And you God of what? And you the goddess of what? How are you the God and goddess of what? That's the question. What are you the God and goddess of? What are you the God and goddess of? That is a beautiful term. It's a beautiful title, but exactly what are you the God and goddess of? Are you the God and goddess of yourself? Or are you the God and goddess of people? And if you're the God and goddess of people, then how can't you be that if you're not the God and goddesses of yourself? Let me say it again. How can you be the God and goddesses of the people when you're not the God and goddesses of self? When you have to work on yourself first before you try to impose yourself on people? When you have to work on self first before you try to impose yourself on people? That's something to think about. All right, so now I'm done with that article. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going into the books, okay? So I'm gonna go back into this book right here, The History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling. Now, in this book, it talks a little bit about self-knowledge. All right, so let's start with the concept about the incarnation of Christ was taken as the chief point. No, no, wait a minute. Man's superiority in these respects. Let me let me start where it says discussion of the nature of humanity involved comparison between humans and other animals. The idea became commonplace that man is the stepchild of nature. Because alone in creation he comes defenseless and naked into the world, without claws or sharp teeth, without swiftness or the protection of a shell, and so on, but with one gift, that of intelligence. Phoenicio of Ficino argued that the possession of intelligence makes man godlike. The possession of intelligence makes man godlike. And as a matter of fact, who is Ficino? Let's look this up. Let's look up. All right, so real fast. Marsilio Ficino, right? Marsilio Ficino was an Italian scholar and Catholic priest who was one of the most influential humanist philosophers of the early Italian Renaissance. He was an astronomer and reviver of Neoplatonism, in touch with the major academics of his day, and the first translator of Plato's complete extant work into Latin. Right? So, according to him, let's go down to what it says: theology, astrology, and the soul. Though trained as a physician, Ficino became a priest in 1473. In 1474, Ficino completed his treatise on the immortality of the soul, right? The Platonic theology. In the rush of enthusiasm for every rediscovery of antiquity, he exhibited a great interest in the arts of astrology, which landed him in trouble with the Catholic Church. In 1489, he was accused of heresy before Pope Innocent the Eighth, and was acquitted. All right, so writing in 1492, Ficino proclaimed, "This century, like a golden age, has restored to the light liberal arts, which were almost extinct: poetry, rhetoric, painting, sculpture, architecture, music. This century appears to have perfected astrology." Oh, wait a minute. Now let's go down to where he says Ficino's letter extended over the years of 1474 and 1494 survive and have been published. He wrote De Amor of Love in 1484, De Vida Liberi Tres, 3 books on life, or De Triplice Vita, the Book of Life, published in 1489, provides a great deal of medical and astrological advice for maintaining health and vigor, as well as espousing the Neo-Platonist view of the world's ensoulment and its integration with the human soul. And what it said, there will be more men or other superstitious and blind who see life plain in even the lowest animals and the meanest plants, but do not see life in the heavens or the world. Now, if those little men grant life to the smallest particle of the world, what folly, what envy, neither to know the whole in which we live and move and have our being, it is itself alive, nor to wish this to be so. One metaphor for this integrated aliveness in Ficino's astrology in the Book of Life, he details the inner links between behavior and consequences. It talks about a list of things that hold sway over a man's destiny. Well, that's surprising to hear from somebody that's a Catholic. Very surprising. Because you never thought somebody that was Catholic would say such a thing that this man is saying. But let me go ahead and continue with the book. All right. So Ficino argues that the possession of intelligence makes man godlike, for by it means he can exploit all the advantages that animals have. The ox strength, the horse swiftness, the wool of the sheep to keep himself warm, whereas animals can only use the one advantage that nature gave them. Man's superiority in these respects did not go unchallenged. A Franciscan monk who converted to Islam, Aslam Termida, who as Abdullah al-Turajman became a vizier or secretary in Tunis, wrote a witty account of a dispute between himself and an ass over the question of which was more noble. Tumeda points out that men built palaces and cities. The ass responds that bees and ants do likewise. Tumeda says that humans eat the flesh of animals. The ass says that worms eat man's flesh in the grave. Matters proceed without advantage to man until Tumeda, still evidently in his unconverted Florentian frame of mind, point out that God made himself man, thus forcing the ass to conceive. Now, if you study mysticism, right? If you study mysticism, esotericism, and Gnosticism, you will understand that God goes deeper than the religion theology. It goes deeper than the laws that was put in these religious texts. God will be representation of what you call the knowledge of self. because the knowledge of self is equivalent to the God essence of self. So the knowledge of self will be equivalent to the God essence of self. Now, let's go down to here. It says the incarnation of Christ was taken as the chief point in extolling the dignity of man. That God himself had glorified human nature by becoming a man in order to fulfill his universal plan. There were parallels to celebrate like the Trinity. Man's soul has three parts: intellect, memory, and will. A Platonist would modify this slightly by citing Plato's reason, spirit, and appetite as the soul's three divisions. Nicholas of Cusa claimed that man's power of imagination and creativity were a reflection of the deity's power in creating the world. Man was the deity of his own created mental world. The book of Genesis in the Old Testament was cited as proving that God had made man himself a god in the sublunary world, giving him dominion over all things. So, do people have a misunderstanding of the concept about God? Now, this is the question that physicists, not philosophers, but physicists ask question. Well, where does God play into humanity? Where does God play into people's life? Exactly. What does God play into humanity and people's life? How does God play an integral role in our lives? Well, basically, if you think about it from a metaphorical standpoint, God plays a role in our life based on our conscience, through our minds, through our behavior, through revelation. So it's more of an esoteric thing, right? Gnosticism. That's what it is. Esoteric and Gnosticism and mysticism. So if you actually read those scriptures, like the books, like the Bible, the Quran, and Torah, you can't take those things from a literal standpoint. You have to really have an esoteric mind to understand what is really conveying and what time period they were speaking of and what they were talking about. So there's a saying is, when you know God, you know yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, God becomes a reflection of you. Okay. Also, I have this book right here, which is called The Knowledge of Self. So now, in this book, I think I find something very interesting about this book. Looking at the concept where it says quantum physics and the black god. Okay, quantum physics and the black god. So this is written by somebody who I know, divine ruler, equality, Allah. Okay, and then there's a quote by Albert Einstein. I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. All right, so let me go ahead and read something from this book. It says all things that exist are organized in statistical states of position, location in space, and momentum, and the speed and direction a particle with energy travels with continuous variation in the probability of what position or momentum is measured and decreed into barrels of energy based on the wavelength of the particle or the wavelength of a medium through which a signal travels via its mass/energy density of the medium. It was once said by Einstein in his attempt to challenge the reality of quantum physics that God doesn't play dice, when in fact the game of dice only appears to operate by chance on a macroscopic level based on the lack of awareness or utilization of data to predict the outcome of a dice throw. In reality, all dice throws can be predicted with a degree of certainty based on the initial physical condition that lead to the dice throw through the strengthening of the awareness of one's subconscious or autonomous function. One can become very successful in not only predicting but also determining such outcomes in a favorable conclusion. So, in fact, God can, has, and does play dice, but in a manner that, upon further study, is in a deterministic fashion when you are aware of the reality of God being none other than the original man, the black man, the measurer of all things. This is the same for apparent dice playing on the particle level called quantum statistics. Well, how does God play dice? Because see, now when we look at the game of dice, right? The game of dice deals with the concept of probability, because probability is dealing with chances. So you in other words, in life you're taking chances. You're taking chances by living. That's what you're doing. You're taking your chances by living. So that's what it means to play the game of dice on a symbolic level, because you're dealing with probability. Life itself is probability. Why? Because it's based on chances. So as a living being, you're taking your chances and you're taking your risks by living. I'm gonna say it again. You're taking your chances and you're taking your risks by living. So life itself, let's just say the world is a book, the world is the library, and the book is life. So life is a book and the world is the library. Life is a book and the world is the library. Why? Because each details of your life is told as a book. And your life is based on what you did in the world. So the world is the library because there's a variety of things that you can do in the world. There's a variety of things that you can see in the world. There's a variety of things that you can encounter in the world that makes a type of impact on your behavior and how you think of yourself and how you view yourself. And it impacts the way you see things about yourself. So it gives some type of influence of the knowledge itself, right? Let me go ahead and continue. This is just an interesting point. And I'm going to stop right here. The act of measurement, also known as knowledge, collapsed the mathematical model known as the statistical wave function, which produces a model that leaves either a certainty of position or a certainty of momentum which can be measured. This sets up a chain of collapsed statistical wave function in the entire universe instantaneously of other particles, thus influencing the entire universe instantaneously, since the wave function of even one particle extends through the entire universe. Well, I have to put that into a process. But there's a lot more in this session, in this book. It's a lot more in this book. It's pretty detailed and concrete. But if you guys don't have this book, it's called Knowledge Yourself, right? A collection of wisdom on the science of everything in life by Supreme Understanding Allah, C. Best of Life Allah, Zunez Allah. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the next book. This is one of my personal favorites. The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. If you don't have Robert Greene book, you might want to get this book, because this is where you get the psychology. You get into the social psychology and the anthropology and the sociology of humanity. All right. This session is called Confront Your Dark Side. All right. So this goes into the self-knowledge. You got to confront your dark side. It says the law of repression. People are rarely who they seem to be. Lurking beneath their polite, affable exterior is inevitably a dark shadow side consisting of the insecurity and the aggressive, selfish impulses they repress and carefully conceal from the public view. This dark side leaks out in behavior that will baffle and harm you. Learn to recognize the signs of the shadow before they become toxic. See people's overt traits, toughness, saintliness, etc., as covering up the opposite quality. You must become aware of your own dark side. In being conscious of it, you can control and channel the creative energies that lurk in your unconscious by integrating the dark side into your personality. You will be a more complete human and will radiate an authenticity that will draw people to you. All right, so in this book, so basically what he's saying is, if we go back to the knowledge of self will not do you any good if you don't deal with that dark side of you, or what Carl Jung liked to call the shadow work, the shadow self. If you don't deal with the shadow self, then how can't you sit here and say you got the knowledge of self if you have not done the shadow work, if you have not dealt with the dark side of you, the shadow self? So what does that mean to have the knowledge of self if you won't deal with the shadow that's there, or that dark part of you? What good is knowledge of self gonna do? All right, so now going down to here, it says what we glimpse into these moments is the dark side of their character. No. Hold on. So here it is. It says this can come in several forms. Out of nowhere, they make a critical, even cruel comment about us, or express a rather harsh assessment of our work or personality. Is this what they really feel and were struggling to conceal? For a moment, they are not so nice, or we hear of their unpleasant treatment of family or employees behind closed doors, or out of the blue, they have an affair with the most unlikely man or woman, and it leads to bad things, or they put their money in some absurd and risky financial scheme, or they do something rash that puts their career in jeopardy, or we catch them in some lie or manipulative act. We can also notice such moments of acting out or behaving against reputation in public figures and celebrities who then go through lengthy apologies for the strange moves that came over them. It says what we glimpse in these moments is the dark side of their character, what the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow consists of all the qualities people try to deny about themselves and repress. This repression is so deep and effective that people are generally unaware of their shadow. It operates unconsciously. According to Jung, the shadow has a thickness to it, depending on how deep the level of repression and the number of traits that are being concealed. Nissen would be said to have a particular thick shadow. When we experience those moments when people reveal the dark side, we can see something came come over their face. Their voice and body language is altered, almost as if another person is confronting us. The features of the upset child suddenly become visible. We feel their shadow as it stirs and emerges. And what it goes on to say, the shadow lies buried deep within, but it becomes disturbed and active in moments of stress or when deep wounds and insecurities are triggered. It also tends to emerge more as people get older. When we are young, everything seems exciting to us, including the various social roles we play. But later in life, we tire of the mask we have been wearing, and leakage is greater. But we rarely see the shadow. The people we deal with are somewhat strangers to us. It is as if we only see a two-dimensional, flattened image of people. Their pleasant social side, knowing the contours of their shadow, makes them come to life in three dimensions. This ability to see the rounded person is a critical step in our knowledge of human nature. Armed with this knowledge, we can anticipate people's behavior in moments of stress, understand their hidden motives, and not get dragged under by any self-destructive tendency. So, the shadow is created in our earliest years and stems from two conflicting forces that we felt. First, we came into this world bursting with energy and intensity. We did not understand the difference between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. We only experienced natural impulses. Some of these impulses were aggressive. We want to monopolize our parents' attention and receive more of it than our siblings. We experience moments of great affection, but also powerful dislike and hatred, even of our parents for not meeting our needs. We want to feel superior in some way and appreciate for it in appearance, strength, or smartness. We could be remarkably selfish if we were denied what we wanted and turned devious and manipulative to get it. We could even find some pleasure in hurting people or fantasize about getting revenge. We experience and express the full gamut of emotions. We were not the innocent angels people imagined children to be. Hmm. At the same time, we were completely vulnerable and dependent on our parents for survival. This dependence lasted for many years. We watched our parents with eagle eyes, noting every signal of approval and disapproval on their faces. They would chastise us for having too much energy and wish we could sit still. They sometimes found us too willful and selfish. They felt that other people were judging them by the behavior of their children. So they wanted us to be nice, to put on a show for others, to act like the sweet angel. They urged us to be cooperative and play fairly, even though at times we wished to behave differently. They encouraged us to tone down our needs to be more of what they needed in their stressful lives. They actively discouraged our tantrums and any forms of acting out. All right. So in this book, and I like this book. I really love this book because it goes deep. You got to get into the concrete of things, right? You got to get into the concrete. So now, based on what Mr. Green was telling us in that book, you have to deal with your dark side. Because now you got to deal with that. If you're talking about your knowledge of self, right? You must recognize that you have a dark side of you that you need to deal with. If you do not deal with that dark side of you and you repress it or you toss it to the side and not pay attention to it, then you're not actually having the knowledge of yourself. You're not even dealing with knowledge of self, because the knowledge of self goes way deeper than putting on an image that you are some type of spiritual person or you're some type of very humble individual, etc. It goes deeper than that. It's actually looking at yourself, analyzing your character. What can you work on to better enhance who you are? What do you need to learn how to deal with as far as your demons, your inner demons is concerned? That's what the knowledge of self is really dealing with right there. Not putting on a facade, not wearing a title and label and say this is what you are. No, but actually dealing with that internal part of you that constantly brings some type of interruption. See, this is why I like Carl Jung, because Carl Jung say you cannot just go through therapy and just get a bunch of feel good rhetoric. You can't take somebody in therapy and say, well, just go to the park or just go to the movies or just read a book. They'll help you. No, you got to go within. You got deep in and pull out the impurities that that person may have and get that person to see themselves and see that there is a problem, and the problem can be you or it is you. So in order for you to deal with those problems and bring about solution, you got to work on you. That means that's where your accountability take place. So knowledge of self also deals with self accountability. And we don't want to deal with self accountability as a people because we want to continue to put on the facade or image. We want to try to cover that part up. All right. Now, this book right here, which is another one of my favorite, it's called The Community of Self by Naeem Akbar, right? This is where you really have to understand how society plays a role and effect on our behavior, because you deal with learned behavior and social behavior. But once you know that you deal with learned and social behavior, now it's time for you to unlearn things and acquire different things. Okay, so what does he speak on here? He talks about the outcome of self-knowledge. Knowledge of self is more than just the recall of certain historical events and significant heroes. Self-knowledge, more than anything else, has to do with knowing how we as human beings work and what our real potential is. The historical and cultural events are simply examples of the best of human capacity. Human goals and aspirations are defined by these cultural and historical images. Now, the outcome of self-knowledge are many and affect all aspects of human life. These outcomes can be summarized in four general areas: self-acceptance, self-help, self-discovery, and self-preservation. The foundation for most of human productive activity is found in these four processes, which are direct outcomes of self-knowledge. Okay? So now he breaks it down. He says self-acceptance is the beginning for all positive social activity. Knowing who you are acquaints you in the best of your human potential and leads to a productive acceptance of self. Accepting self means that you like self and you have a commitment to self. Accepting self means that you want to be yourself and not anyone else's self. All right. Now, self-accepting people recognize and follow those who represent their best interests. Okay. So self-help is another rational function, fundamental human drive that again has its basis in self-knowledge. Human beings strive for independent self-mastery, not only in terms of their personal development, but also in their social development. The young child likes to tie its own shoe once it knows how. People like to take care of their own needs when they know who they are. Depending upon someone to supply their basic needs is a byproduct of the type of slavery condition, which requires that people must be deprived of self-knowledge. Okay. Now, self-discovery. What is self-discovery? All right. So self-discovery deals with the fuel for exploration, scholarship, and all of the pursuits that guides our actions by the self-acceptance, which has, but self-discovery is the fuel for exploration and scholarship and all of the pursuits that guides our action towards increasing the store of human information. Intrigued by the self-acceptance, which has come from even limited self-knowledge, the person is actively motivated to know more about self in the personal and group sense. All right. Now, it said the boundaries of personal capability are also challenged by this force of self-discovery. The person with limited self-knowledge and consequently limited drive for self-discovery will be quite complacent in taking initiative. They will accept whatever limited definition they are given about what they can or cannot do. They will sit calmly among the mediocre, never challenging the so-called handicaps or restriction on their activity. Right? So knowledge yourself is more than a catchy phrase. The ancient master of Egypt taught man know thyself. Ancient revelation and modern science agree that the real power in human capability is based in the consciousness or of self or self-knowledge. As we have seen in this session, knowing who we are is the power of psychological, economic, and political and self-effectiveness. People who know who they are can change themselves and change their world. Each person and each tribe must have self-knowledge if there is any hope of their survival and successful competition with the rest of humanity. All right, so please check this book out right here. It's called The Community of Self by Dr. Naeem Akbar. So Naeem Akbar, all right, is an African American psychologist. Okay, very good psychology. You guys can check out his videos, his lectures, and all of that. So just type them up on YouTube, etc. Okay, so also I have other information that people can personally check out for themselves. I'm not going to go into because of time. All right, so this book is called Transparent Minds, a study of self-knowledge by Jordi Fernandez. Okay, Self-Knowledge for Humans by Quasim Kassam. Taoism and Self-Knowledge, the chart for the cultivation of profession by Karen Dupo. All right. And this book right here, this book is called The Concept of Mind by Gilbert Ryle, which is the 60th anniversary. Okay, The Concept of Mind. This one's called Self-Knowledge. How well do you really know yourself? By Mark Manson. Self-Knowledge. How well do you really know yourself? By Mark Manson. Self-Knowledge and Self-Deception by Hugo Strandberg. Self-Knowledge and Self-Deception by Hugo Strandberg. All right, and this comes from actually it's a textbook. It's called Theories of Knowledge: How to Think About What You Know. Course Guidebook by Professor Joseph H. Schimber, Lafayette College. And last but not least, this book here is called What Is This Thing Called Knowledge by Duncan Pitcher. What is this thing called knowledge by Duncan Pitcher? Okay. So with that being said, that's all I have for today, for the evening. And I thank you guys for those of you that were tuning in, watching. All right. And make sure you guys support the channel, like the channel, share the channel, etc., etc. Okay. So until next time, peace and power, elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying deuces. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share the channel, and check out all my other video contents on here. And I will talk to you guys again. All right. So the next subject I might build on scientific knowledge. Okay. So I might build on the concept about scientific knowledge. And what is scientific knowledge and what does that mean to have a scientific knowledge? All right. So be on the lookout for that. Peace.